Welcome to Be Inspired, your ultimate resource for finding inspiration and living consciously in a rapidly changing world. Welcome to Still Blooming, Conversations with the Artists. I'm Francesca Durham, curator of this group exhibition on view at the Art Gallery of Burlington from February 7th through to May 24th. This exhibition asks a question I've asked myself many times. What does it mean to still be blooming? How do we keep creating beauty and meaning and community despite adversity? Over this episode series, I'm sitting down with each of the artists in the exhibition to hear their answers. And I'd like to start by saying thank you to our sponsor, the Halton Black History Awareness Society, for your generous support of our artists. Now, today, I'm thrilled to be in conversation with Kristen Allicock. Her piece in the exhibition is actually a diptych called Yin and Yang, a love rooted in balance. Kristen, thanks so much for being here and part of this podcast series for Still Blooming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
As you know, there are 5 core questions in this mini deep dive conversation. So are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go. Question 1 is more of making a personal connection from your perspective. Your piece in the exhibition could be described as I look at it, as structural harmony. And I think for me, the most striking element is this counter-changed color palette that you have going on. To start, I'd like to know what the phrase still blooming means to you personally, and how does your work in this exhibition embody that idea?
Yeah, so still blooming for me, to put it simply, just means growth that continues despite interruption. So
Nice.
We live in a world that's very chaotic, right? Outside of our own little bubbles that we create for ourselves, there's a lot that's happening that could easily just, keep you stunted. It can get you down. It can kind of put you in this cycle of just despair, right? Because everything that we're seeing is always just like bad news, some sort of political conflict here, inflation, this is going up, cost of living going up, wages staying the same, all kinds of chaos. But for me, yeah, still blooming just means that, just growth despite all of that, right? Or growth in spite of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, like, it's about unfolding after grief, after doubt, after being told that, to shrink. And again, we as Black people historically have always been either, if not directly told, been indirectly made or systemically made to feel smaller than we actually are. So for me, blooming is just, it's not a one-time event, it's cyclical.
Well, that takes me perfectly into my next question, which would be more about your creative process. So let's talk about the vibrancy and the energy that's coming from your piece. What inspired it, and were there any surprising moments or even challenges in bringing this piece to life?
Yeah, so my creative process with this, if we want to talk technically, it actually started as a hand drawing.
Okay.
So it was a hand drawn sketch that I eventually, actually, funny enough, it was one of the first pieces that I ever digitized. So it was hand drawn, with marker and pencil. It wasn't colored in, it was just black and white. I left a lot of my work years before, just black and white and gray, right? I didn't really play around with colors, or I'll usually have a touch of color. But this one, I said, you know what, I want to try digitizing some of my work. And so, yeah, it was kind of my first time really kind of digging into Illustrator. But the process in creating the pieces, when I was drawing it, at the time, it was really just inspired by the disconnect within the masculine and the feminine that I was beginning to see, and in particular, within the Black community, right? That divide within the home, that separation, within the community. And again, if you want to go broader than that, just that continual conversation of just, masculine versus feminine, or feminine versus masculine. It just seems that we were being strategically placed at odds. And again, it wasn't anything new at the time, and it still isn't now. It's something that's always been happening historically. So that's sort of what inspired the piece, that understanding through my own lived experience and figuring out the world just by, observation, or by just my own, thoughts, and knowing just that you require all parts to create balance. So while you can have 2 individual pieces, and that's why I chose to do it in the diptych, is that you can have 2, lone pieces that by themselves, they can, speak volumes and represent whatever they represent as a singular entity, but together it creates that balance, it creates that harmony. So that was kind of the thought process process that I was in when creating this, and like speaking to the the circles in the hair.
Well, we'll get to that in just a second. Hang on 1 second. I'm
Sure.
just going to roll it back to the sketch, your first digitized piece. I love it because even as a black and white, I think you would see in that piece how you're harmonizing tension, right? The yin and the yang between the piece itself. And it's funny because, as you know, in the exhibition we have Biota, which is by Kemi Walker, and it's that one structural piece, that bust that's within nature, and then there's your piece. It has nature all around it, but it's between two people.
Yeah.
I find it beautiful the way you were able to, as I said, create this sort of structural harmony that's also mirroring each other. And
Right.
so let's go on and talk about the botanical imagery as language next, because the exhibition is exploring how flowers and botanical forms can be languages of survival and memory and resistance. Tell us a little bit about that and how they're anchoring your piece.
Yeah, I like how you use that word anchoring, because that's exactly the way that I intended on using these plants. So I chose the Monstera plant. Not only is it a favorite plant of mine, but it also ties to my South American heritage. So my parents are from Guyana. So while I am a part of the Caribbean community and culture for sure, Monstera plants are native to Central and South America, if I am correct. But yeah, like you said, these plants are surrounding these figures, right? And it's anchoring them. For me, it represents like history. The ancestors are kind of like guarding them and protecting them. Kind of wrapping them in this form of protection, if that makes sense. The Monstera plant, what I like about it, personally as a plant, and why I chose to put it in this piece, is that they're very adaptive and they can survive in very like tropical climates and in low light, and that they do look flawed at first glance because of the perforations and how the leaves kind of split, but they're not, right? They're a very strong plant, and so I feel that represent that kind of it kind of ties into the entire message, the resilience and the strength despite
Correct.
The environment,
right?
So
and the Monstera plant, I'll just go back to confirm that it is native to the tropical rainforests of Central America, specifically the regions that are spanning from southern Mexico down to Panama. So you are correct. And as we move beyond and talk about the botanical side of things, I see the softness in using the botanical form, the Monstera leaves, softening hard edges. And it leads me beautifully into the next question, which is around softness and power, because the exhibition is repositioning softness as sovereignty, meaning reclaiming tenderness and care and that vulnerability. It's challenging the idea that beauty or botanical imagery is merely decorative. So how does your work speak to this tension between softness and strength?
Yeah, so Black people, we're always expected to be resilient, to be strong, but never to be tender or vulnerable, like you said earlier, right? And in this portrait, I chose the profile because while the upright posture, it exudes strength, it's not overbearing in a sense. It's not combative. It's not and the gaze that both figures have as they look at each other, it's a softened gaze, right? The lips are not in a smile, but they're also not straight. They're a little pursed a little bit, so it represents like a calmness, and that's what I was hoping to portray in the facial expressions of these two figures here. So like they stand in their strength, but they still exude the softness. They still show the love and the care for one another, that ability to be tender, to be vulnerable.
Yes, I think you've captured that brilliantly. As you're saying, we stand alone, firm in our truth individually, but then I think it's also amplified by prioritizing that as much as we can be alone, we can stand with each other. And I think it's important to have that representation too.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, and let's go back to the circles and spirals.
Yeah, so if anyone who's been following my work, or once you look at my work, you'll see this kind of repeated in my work. There's some sort of linear or circular motif throughout my pieces, and it's intentional because it's, again, meant to represent that never-ending cycle, meaning that who we are as people, it's a continuous thing. Like, we don't just start and get to a point where, okay, I'm done becoming everything that I wanted to be, I'm done experiencing everything that I wanted in this world. Like, this is the finite point. Nothing is finite. To me, I believe everything is infinite, and it's a continual thing, and that's what I love about the circle and what it represents. And not only that, though, on the other hand, it also can represent that while we go forward, we might be experiencing the same things over and over again. So, like, things might repeat themselves, but not always in the same way. But it's always an opportunity for us to kind of, like, again, for lack of a better word, to circle back, right? To learn from whatever that previous experience was, or whatever that was, and to kind of go forth and do different, or to do better.
Exactly.
So to speak. So for me, that's what the circles represent here, in knowing, because again, we all make mistakes, we all fumble. But again, it's that coming back around to meet each other, is what is beautiful in that.
Well, thank you for clarifying. I actually didn't know how the depth of it all. So it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing the details on the spirals and the circles. Let's talk about more of a legacy question. If somebody was to encounter your work in the exhibition, whether it's in person or even through the digital catalog, what do you want people to understand about this work?
For me, my work, at first glance, you look at it and it just looks decorative, but there's layers to it. It's more intentional than that. But the intention, first and foremost, is for others to see the beauty in Blackness, and to see the representation of Blackness, or just variations of what Blackness means to me, and what that can look like. Because again, historically, in my lifetime, and again, a lot of my art, whether it's visual art or otherwise, it comes from my experience, first and foremost, is rooted in that. And in my short little lifetime, I didn't grow up, I grew up not seeing a lot of representation in visual arts of people that look like me, and especially like artists that look like me. I mean, yeah, there's Basquiat, and there's, if you go to like literature, there's like James Baldwin, and, Audre Lorde, and all those people. But again, in actual paintings, like if I go to museums and art galleries, I'm not seeing a lot of faces that look like me. So as I was growing within my art practice, and as an artist and as a woman, I was like, I want to see more works of people that look like me, and I want to be able to give that to the generations that follow me. I want them to be able to walk into a space, a gallery space, and see representations of themselves. Sometimes you'll find some of my work, they're faceless, and again, that's also intentional, because my hope is that someone can see themselves in the work that is reflected. In any way, it doesn't have to be a deep, meaningful way. It can just be like, wow, that woman's hair looks like how I wear my hair, or I can see myself kind of standing in that light. So basically, it's just about being seen and feeling seen. So that's really what I would love viewers to take. And again, not just speaking to the Black diaspora that might come through and see my work, but just for people outside of that to have a better understanding that we are not a monolith, that we are complex in the best of ways, that there's so many different layers and so much varieties to who we are, and despite what history and the media would like you to think, and to just basically reconsider what Blackness is to them, or what it may look like to them.
Okay, and you had mentioned Basquiat and James Baldwin. I was going to ask you, who inspires you?
It's not just one individual, to be honest. Honestly, I don't really idolize, people like other artists or people in pop culture or history like that. But the thing is, I am influenced by Black excellence, so to speak.
Where are you taking your inspiration from? And usually with artists, of course, it's not going to be any one sole individual, but if you could say where a great lot of inspiration comes from for you personally.
The women in my life, my mother, my grandmother, my aunt, definitely watching them move in the world and overcome what they've overcome, and it's been inspiring for me. Outside of that, like I said, going to great accomplished people in history, Black people in history, is very inspiring for me, because what that signals to me is that I don't have to ask for permission to exist in spaces where I was not once welcomed, right? Whereas, our ancestors before us, or, Black folks before us, they had to push those doors down. And because of that, I'm now in a position that I no longer have to ask for permission. I'm allowed to just exist in my Blackness. And that is what inspires me and continues to push me to do this work.
Well said. And a great place to wrap things up. Kristen, thank you so much for the beautiful conversation and the gift of your work in Still Blooming. If our listeners would like to find you, where can we find you on social media? Where are you hanging out?
So I'm on all the socials. So Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all under the Art of KDA. I'm more active on Instagram than anything else.
Okay.
But you can also find me on my website. I have a website where it's like my portfolio, and also just a link to my shop where if you are interested in purchasing some of my work. It's theartofkda.com.
Theartofkda.com. And you are doing a couple of other things. Let's just take a minute and tell people your own involvement in the art community and what you're building.
So I'm also the co-creator and co-founder of an organization called Flow, Form, and Frequencies.
Okay.
So basically it's where art and music collide. So our goal is to create a community, to create a platform for Black artists and creatives. So whether you're a musician, a poet, a songwriter, a singer, even a dancer, a visual artist, graphic artist, whatever your medium is, we want to create space and create a platform for the work to be on display and to gather in spaces where you normally won't gather, And again, it's just to bring those two worlds together. So far we've had a few events last year where it was more so music showcases. So we would have a series of artist performances. Nice. And we would have several artists have their work displayed on the walls surrounding us. So while you're taking in the music, you're also surrounded by the art. So it's sort of like an immersive experience we're trying to create. For this year, we're going to do more of that, but also looking to expand and do other things. So we do have an artist salon that's coming up in March, hopefully weather pending.
Of course.
But basically, it's a Black artist salon, space for artists to gather in conversation, no pressure, it's not a networking event. Like you're not expected to show up and turn on kind of thing. It's just, to be in a space with other like-minded individuals where you can bounce ideas off, one another, or maybe connect with somebody that you can, grow whatever idea you had floating around in your head. It's basically just a space for us to come together, just exist, to converse and connect with like-minded individuals. So
and when is that going to happen?
Yeah, that's going to be on March 7th.
Okay.
At the Heartbreak Chef in Kensington Market in downtown Toronto.
Perfect.
We do have an Instagram page, so you can follow us at Flow Form Frequencies on Instagram, and we also we have a website as well where you can get more information about who we are, and what we do. So it's flowformfrequencies.com.
Fantastic, and it's a brilliant idea to keep the momentum going and to keep the community growing as well. Thank you, everybody who is listening into this conversation. You can see Kristen's work as well as the full exhibition, including all the artists at the Art Gallery of Burlington from February 7th through to May 24th. We also have a digital catalog with the complete curatorial statement about the artwork, images, and more at francescadurham.com. And if you're a curator, a gallery owner, or an arts organization interested in community-engaged exhibitions, I do encourage you to visit francescadurham.com to learn more. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, everybody, keep blooming and stay inspired.